Okay, let's jump right in. Today, we're doing a deep dive on a country that, for its size, has this just massive global influence. We're talking about Jamaica.
Hmm.
Its cultural footprint is huge. Music, sports, you name it. But we're looking at a story that suggests the economic foundation that's held the island up for decades is starting to show some serious stress.
That's right. And what's so interesting here is that this foundation, this model, it wasn't some official government plan. It
No.
was a cultural system. This deep implicit understanding that if you couldn't find an opportunity at home, you'd go find it somewhere else. You'd succeed, you'd send money back, and then eventually you would come home to build.
The great Jamaican cultural workaround.
That's the term, exactly.
So our mission for this deep dive is to look at the sources we've got. An analysis and some reports from Jamaica Homes with insights from a chartered builder, Dean Jones, and really understand why that workaround is now, well, collapsing.
Yeah, and there are two huge external shocks hitting at the same time.
Right. And we need to see why that old sort of linear dream has to become something different, something more like a networked reality.
But you have to get your head around the old model first to see why this is such a big deal. For, what, 70 years, this idea, leave, succeed, send money home, return, that was the development policy in practice.
An unofficial one.
Totally unofficial. But it let the nation export its most valuable resource, its people, its human capacity, and then import the capital it needed just to survive.
And that gets us right to this paradox, this contradiction at the heart of the little but talawa idea, small but powerful.
It really does.
Because the people are global, they're sending back billions. But that success story kind of hides a major problem at home.
It's a stark contradiction. I mean, the country is always short on crucial skills. You're talking doctors, engineers, specialized trades, but it's also arguably one of the richest nations on earth in terms of its talent pool abroad.
So you're constantly exporting capacity.
You export capacity and you import survival capital. It's this constant cyclical transfer.
We've always just called this brain drain, which, I don't know, it sounds a bit passive, like something that just happens by accident.
Right, like water flowing downhill.
Yeah.
But this is where Dean Jones, in the source material, really reframes it.
What does he say?
He says, Jamaicans didn't just abandon the country. They engineered a socioeconomic workaround. Migration was, in effect, their informal development policy. For generations of families, it was the most logical economic move they could make.
Okay, but I have to push back on that a little. If you frame it as an engineered workaround, doesn't that sort of let the government off the hook? I mean, for not creating those opportunities at home in the first place?
That's a really fair point, but I think Jones is drawing a line between what works for a family and what works for a nation.
Okay.
The workaround was a massive success for individual households. It paid for school, it built houses, it put food on the table, but at the national level, it completely starved the institutions.
Oh, so
Well, when your best nurses leave, your hospitals suffer. When your best teachers leave, the schools decline. The builders, the engineers.
yeah.
You lose that institutional memory, that mentorship.
I see. And there's an index that sort of quantifies this.
Yeah, and it's a pretty shocking number. The briefs we saw mentioned that as of early 2026, Jamaica is ranked third globally.
Third globally on the Human Flight and Brain Drain Index.
Exactly. That's not just a trend. That's a structural dependency on other economies.
Okay, so now let's get to the core of it. Why is that dependency, that whole foundation, starting to wobble now? You mentioned two big simultaneous shocks.
Yeah, and this is where the story gets really interesting, because they're hitting from completely different directions, but they're making each other's effects so much worse.
So let's take shock number one, the narrowing door.
Right. For decades, this whole workaround was built on having reliable, predictable access to a few key countries, the US, Canada, the UK.
One main door, essentially.
One main door, yeah. So when the policies in those countries shift, maybe visa processing slows down, or they change the rules for skilled workers, the whole system back in Jamaica suddenly becomes very vulnerable.
And you're saying that a political decision thousands of miles away has an immediate physical impact on the island. How does that translate into something like, say, the real estate market?
Okay, so think about it from the perspective of someone in the diaspora. They've been planning for years, saving up to come back and build a house, maybe for retirement.
The long-term plan.
The long-term plan. And that plan needs certainty. So if the door to earning that money in the U.S. suddenly becomes uncertain, what do?
Yeah.
You hesitate. You pause the plan.
You wait and see.
You wait and see. And as Jones points out, that hesitation immediately shows up as stalled construction projects.
Yeah.
People delay buying land. They move their investment capital somewhere safer, somewhere less volatile.
So the Jamaican real estate market basically becomes a barometer for U.S. immigration policy.
A direct barometer. If the exit plan is uncertain, the return invest plan becomes just as risky.
That makes so much sense. And it's not just about stopping movement, it's about losing trust in the whole cycle. And this is happening at the same time as shock number 2.
Yes, and the second shock is it's faster, it's quieter, and honestly, it probably has much bigger long-term consequences. We're talking about AI, automation, digital platforms, just completely restructuring whole industries.
Which jobs that Jamaicans have traditionally relied on are the most vulnerable here?
Historically, a lot of the pathways were in, service industries, administrative support, certain trades, caregiving roles.
Right.
A lot of those exact jobs, the ones that gave people their first foothold and generated that remittance income, are the ones being de-skilled or even eliminated by new technology. The U.S. economy that someone entered 20 years ago just isn't there anymore.
And this is where that warning from Jones comes in, which I thought was so powerful.
It's a sharp one. He says, "We are training people for yesterday's exits, while tomorrow's economy is already closing doors and opening windows we haven't prepared for."
So we're past just brain drain now. This isn't just skilled people leaving, it's something else.
It's brain mismatch. You've got this incredibly motivated, adaptable talent pool, but their skills are misaligned with the economic reality that's emerging, both abroad and at home.
They're ready for a ladder that doesn't exist anymore.
Exactly, an industrial age ladder. And for a small country like Jamaica, missing that window, that tech transition, the economic gap between them and the rest of the world could become almost impossible to bridge.
So with that old logic failing under these two pressures, the real risk isn't that people stop leaving.
No.
The risk is that the whole cycle of leaving, earning, and returning, it just stops paying off for the country. It doesn't guarantee a positive engagement anymore.
That is the absolute heart of the matter.
Mm-hmm.
The old cycle of leave first, build later isn't a guarantee anymore. And this is why we have to talk about the difference between remittances and actual institutions.
Remittances are huge, though. We know they prop up the currency, they keep families out of poverty. So why aren't they enough for real, sustainable national development?
Because remittances were almost entirely about consumption. As Jones says, they keep households afloat. They pay for groceries, for consumer goods. Maybe they buy a piece of land that just sits there, empty.
It's a safety net, not an engine.
It is a perfect social safety net. But it doesn't build ladders.
What do you mean by that? What does it fail to produce?
Okay, think of it like this. A remittance check might let a family buy a new car. That's consumption, right? You're importing a finished product.
Right.
But that money doesn't build the trade school to train the mechanics. It doesn't staff the hospital. It doesn't mentor the next generation of engineers who could, maybe build a local factory. It doesn't carry institutional memory.
It's a one-time transaction versus building a system?
Exactly. Development requires productive investment. And that needs functioning local systems. The big takeaway here is that a country just cannot outsource its future forever. That capacity has to be built at home.
Which leads us to the solution part of this. If pride and patriotism aren't enough, and I love that Dean Jones quote, "Patriotism doesn't pay mortgages, systems do," what's the fundamental shift that has to happen?
The math only changes when you start treating housing and construction, the biggest target for diaspora money, not as a social issue, but as a core piece of economic infrastructure.
The problem isn't a lack of money then, it's friction.
It is all about friction.
So walk me through that. Why does a skilled Jamaican professional in London maybe choose to buy an investment property there instead of sending the money home to build?
Because the friction back home is just too high. If you can't easily navigate the planning process, if you can't get good financing, if you can't find reliable, skilled labor, you're going to take your hard-earned money where the system is predictable.
You'll buy a condo in Florida that gives you passive rental income.
Instead of sinking it into a complicated building project back home that might stall for years, capital always seeks the path of least resistance.
So the solution has to be about designing for movement, not trying to stop it.
You can't stop it, so you have to incorporate it into your strategy. And the sources point to a few things. First, you formalize circular migration, structured returns.
So this isn't just coming home for a holiday.
No. This is like a doctor who left permanently now has a structured program where she comes back for 2 months every year to train residents at the hospital, or an engineer comes back for a specific 2-year project.
So the diaspora becomes a circulating pool of expertise, not just a one-way street.
Exactly. And second, You have to shift the focus from passive investment, just buying property, to productive reinvestment.
So instead of buying a third rental property, you're investing in a local tech startup or a trade school, something that actually creates jobs.
Something that builds those ladders. Productive investment creates more job creators. And third, and this is the most critical part, given the redesign of work shock, you have to align the entire country's skills with the coming economy.
Digital readiness, remote work infrastructure.
All of it. You create a true digital anchor. You make it possible for a Jamaican to earn a high-value salary from a U.S. tech company, but live, raise their family, and spend that money locally.
That's the whole ideological shift right there.
It is. The goal is to maximize what people can earn globally while minimizing the friction of anchoring that wealth at home. The old dream was linear.
Right. Leave, then earn, then return, then build.
The new dream has to be networked. It's iterative. It's build your skills, move strategically, invest continuously, and anchor at home. You have to build systems that make every one of those steps the most economically rational choice.
It's not just about an emotional pull anymore.
No, the math has to work.
Yeah.
This deep dive really shows that Jamaica isn't at a moment of decline. It's at a huge bargaining moment, a turning point with its diaspora and, with itself. The focus has to shift away from this futile idea of stopping people from leaving. That's going to happen. The real work is creating powerful, systemic reasons for them to stay connected and to keep investing productively.
And that brings it all back to that physical metaphor from the sources, that nations like buildings, they don't usually fail because of a lack of vision. They fail because of delayed structural decisions.
The cultural workaround has hit its limit.
It really has.
Yeah.
So the final question for you, the listener, is whether the systems, political, economic, will finally lay a foundation that's strong enough so that all the options, staying, returning, or even building from afar, they all make perfect economic sense. Because when the math works, the talent always follows.